This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to a special meeting of the Board of Finance this Wednesday, May 22nd. We do have a regular agenda, and we don't talk about the budget, as I think, thank you. As I think everyone here in the room knows, and those at home know, the budget unfortunately did not pass yesterday. It failed by a vote of 610 to 689. Out of about 17,000 voters, I'm told.
1,700.
17,000, sorry. Our goal tonight will be to try and set a new budget, which will have to go through the same process as the one that failed yesterday, meaning there will be a future town meeting, followed by a referendum, and then we will have to schedule a special meeting of this board for sometime around the third week of June, to hopefully, after the budget passes, set the mill rate. So the Board of Selectmen will be convening a meeting perhaps as early as this Friday, and once they do that, they will set the schedule of the town meeting, the referendum, and once we know those dates, I'll get a meeting set for this board, which will follow the referendum. Before we move on, I'd just like to allow some latitude to the first selectman to let him comment, if he doesn't mind, on the budget process and the budget yesterday a little bit.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. So during this 5 or 6 months that we've been preparing this budget, we've had a series of workshop session meetings. We filmed the meetings. They were streamed live on Facebook, and it culminated with 2 public meetings to present the budget. And all along, ladies and gentlemen, I said that we realized this was a difficult mill rate projected increase of 2.65. But I also said on several occasions that the mill rate increase really didn't add a lot to this budget. But what it did was, what it would have done was protect the existing services. And I said to the public many times that we need you to tell us, are you willing to pay to maintain the same services? Because the cost of those services have skyrocketed dramatically in all aspects of our government. So the government over the past 2 years has been hit with inflation, like all of us have, in many categories. This year, some of the drivers were health insurance increases, pension contribution increases, and a lot of other inflationary aspects to what's happening to our government. So in the end, 53% of the people yesterday said that they weren't willing to pay for the existing service model. So the role of this Board of Finance is not to add to this budget. It's to decrease this budget. This is the responsibility of this Board of Finance, to find areas where we can reduce the budget. We're going to have, as Tim referenced, a Board of Selectmen meeting probably this Friday with one item on the agenda, to call another town meeting, which will be on or about June 10th. That'll be confirmed. At that town meeting, I will be back up there presenting a revised budget, a budget that's less than what you see that failed yesterday at 2.65. And then after that, as Tim referenced, there'll be another referendum. If that budget fails the second time, then we will have to probably borrow $10 million a month through tax anticipation notes, because we'd have no money without a passed budget starting July 1st. For those that don't know, the way the system works is, if we cannot pass a referendum by July 1st, we revert back to the existing fiscal year budget that we're in now. And we'd have to take out these tax anticipation notes to fund the operations of the government, because the alternative would be there'd be no government. So that's something that we already know we're going to have to do if the referendum continues to fail. So Tim, thank you very much for the overview, for letting me do that.
Great, thank you, Mike. I did fail to mention, we got in about, I think, 11 letters today from members of the community. 3 or 4 members of the Board of Ed, they were stating their opinion in their own capacity as citizens of the town. I would say universally, the letters were in support of the Board of Ed. There were some other comments about other departments, but primarily they were supportive of the Board of Ed. I would like to go through the regular agenda, hopefully relatively swiftly, so we can get to the budget. I'd like to do the minutes first and then move on to the tax collector's list so that Stacy can dispense with that, and then do the reports, and then we'll move on to item number 4. So let's start with the minutes, please. Hopefully the members have read them, and I'll take a motion if you
Tim,
would.
I have a correction.
Please go right ahead.
It's just in the first paragraph, it says that about, should have said email, not website, about the Board of Finance. It says Chairman Donahue opened by reminding the public of the website. It wasn't the website, it was the email.
Good point.
Thank you. Seems like Tammy has that one. Any other comments on the,
Just a question.
Yep.
We have received another copy of the minutes with our packet that was on our desk here, in addition to the one that was mailed to us. Is there something different?
yeah, Mike, you want to handle that? Mike Callahan?
That's you.
Something different, what?
Is there something different about these minutes in contrast with the ones that were mailed to us?
I actually don't know when they get mailed. I know that there were a couple minor revisions that were made, so I don't know which copy might have went out in the mail.
It's in your
The
package.
first one, before the changes, yeah. So, if the minutes we have here are the revised ones.
My understanding, Nancy, is that in the short paragraph below item number 5, the changes occurred in that paragraph.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, any other comments on the minutes? If not, I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion as amended to accept the minutes. as
Second,
amended.
please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Stacy, would you mind coming up, please, and talking about the suspense list?
So we're changing the order, is that right?
Yeah, that's
Sure.
what he just mentioned.
Yeah. I wasn't sure if we could do that with a special meeting, that's why I'm asking.
Would you like to make a motion? And then I'll wait.
I don't think we can do that in a special meeting. I don't think we can make a motion, but I'm fine with the changing of the order, I just wanted to ask.
Go ahead, please, Stacy.
Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Stacy Yarborough. I'm the tax collector and town clerk for North Haven, and I present to you the 2024 suspense list. It was provided to you guys about a week in advance for your review. If you have any questions.
I looked at it, Stacy. Obviously, it looks like 2 taxpayers, Mr. Faricelli, which I think is the old Tire Pond property, right?
Correct.
Made up, he made up, was it $240,000 that, and Inferno Wood Pizza, which was on Universal Drive. So
Correct.
those 2 alone made up $290,000, give or take, of the
Correct.
$340,000 list.
The remainder is bankruptcies, deaths, moved out of town, businesses that have moved out of town and whatnot. And just as a gentle reminder, just because I've placed it in suspense doesn't mean we can't collect it. We can continue to attempt to collect it. It's just improbable, and that's why we put it on the suspense list for this year.
And so it comes off the town's books, but it doesn't mean you stop your collection efforts.
The only thing that would stop us is the 15-year statute of limitations.
Okay.
Stacy, could you give me a couple of examples of what you mean by multiple reasons?
Let's see, which one are you
So
referencing?
in particular for 441 State Street.
1 second. What page?
The first page
On the
states the
very first
reasons
page,
listed as multiple.
all of the reasons listed.
Oh, for that one. That is, as Mr. Dankney just mentioned, that's the Tower Pond property. Highly unlikely the town will ever recover those funds, considering the state of the property and the issues with the state itself, et cetera.
It's environmental. It's a huge environmental problem, if I
It is.
recall.
It's a
The-
brownfield.
Yeah.
The new owner is, has approached me, and I believe Mr. Frieda as well, with hopes of dealing with state and town issues, but I don't know anything further from when that meeting occurred a few months ago.
So the new owner is not the one that's listed here?
No, that's the prior owner.
That's the prior owner. So the taxes would be collected from the prior owner and not from the current owner?
That's not true. The owner of record is responsible for all taxes. So whomever it took the property, the taxes run with the land. So
That's
they
what I
are
assumed.
the new owners of the debt.
Okay. And we're unable to collect it from the new owner? Is that what you're saying?
Well, do you understand
far-
the state of the property, correct? Okay, well, there's nothing, and there's lots of issues with the state of Connecticut, so that has a history, quite a history.
Okay.
And then you also brought up, I believe, Inferno.
Yes.
Did someone have a question about Inferno?
I was just pointing out, Stacy, that makes up the second largest
Oh, okay.
item there, that's all.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, that one.
All right, any other questions by the members on the suspense list?
And there was a foreclosure sale for Pedersen,
Yes,
I guess, last month?
yes, it occurred, and that's a new owner. I think they paid everything except for the current grand list, and that's the responsibility of the new owner.
Good.
Sure.
I'll take a motion on the suspense list, please.
Make a motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you.
Stacy, I'll give this to Tammy after the meeting.
No worries.
Okay. All right, why don't we go back to the top, please? I guess not the top, but item number 2, our normal reports, please, starting with the revenue budget. I guess my only observation was we got our second ECS payment in. We continue to do well on our interest on our short-term investments. We had a very good month for building fees, fire fees,
Yes.
and to date with, I guess, 2 months left, we're at 96% of our budgeted revenue item.
Quick question, under State of Connecticut Town, the telephone access line, we're running at about 166% of what was budgeted. And I'm just wondering if that's an anomaly for this year, or should we expect that same type of revenue for next year?
I checked, that depends on personal property for AT&T and Frontier.
So is that
We
something,
had previous years that was a lot lower, so
is there a reason that it's so much higher this year?
it depends on what, I'm not sure about that.
Right,
Oh,
because we
yeah.
budgeted for 50,000 and it's
Yes,
currently at 83.
last year we received 50,000, so that's why we budgeted that.
It's more of an anomaly this year. It's a good
Yes.
year for us. It could go back next year. But there was an increase in infrastructure and personal property,
Right, yes.
so.
Got it.
Any other questions or comments on the revenue side?
There was some good reporting, especially, once again, when it comes to interest on our short-term investments. So thanks to Ingrid and Mr. Monaco and company for making those moves and maximizing the income on the dollars we possess.
All right, thank you, Mike.
Yeah, I just want to ask, as far as the old, the grants for municipal projects, that's still listed at 2249, at 2 million and change. Because of the state budget surplus, can we expect any additional income that was unanticipated when we made this budget?
No.
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 They didn't.
There was
Yeah.
a slight bump in ECS. We had
Yeah.
more ECS money. That money will be coming in June, the 2.2 million. So there's no other upside other than what we already have budgeted for.
Wait, another 2 million on ECS, or the?
No, on
That's-
municipal grant and aid.
MRSA.
So the old MRSA, so that
Right.
dollar figure,
Yeah,
you see the revised budget? We will get that in June.
I see.
So in other words, there's 2.2 million in revenue coming in June
Yes.
versus what you see here.
Yeah, I know that the state talked about increasing aid for education, but that may be more for the cities in need. And,
Well, that's next year, right? But I saw the same, Mike.
Right.
okay.
So the interesting thing is, the state budget that was established a year ago in June is actually a 2-year budget.
Well, that's
So-
always the case.
Yeah, so it's always the case that it's 2 years, so it really shouldn't be a big mystery as to what these numbers are for these line items for 2 years in a row. It's disclosed in their budget, so unless it changes dramatically, this should be something that we should be able to forecast pretty accurately.
I'll just sum it up this way. We're going to be closing the gap on community service fees. The interest income over the next, through the balance of this month and through June, there'll still be an upside there. There will be, on an average, in my view, about $28,000 a week in building permit fees that aren't reflected here. So I'm very confident on this. Will be a balanced budget with a modest surplus.
Related to that, Mr. Frieda, and the community service fees, do you think that the town pool being closed for a good portion of the summer in order to replace the roof will have an impact on those community service fees?
Well, one has nothing to do with the other. So the community service fees are the fees we generate for the counseling service we have over there.
Oh, only for counseling,
Right.
okay, now I understand. So BH Care, got it.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Nancy. Any other questions, comments on the revenue side? No. All right, if not, let's go on to the expenses. Ingrid, if I could, page 5, the CAFR. Is the reason we're over budget there because,
This is page
We-
5.
yes, is because we had to pay for last year's CAFR and we had to make a down payment, if you will, on the next one? Is that what happened there?
No, usually there's certain items that are not in the contract and other audits that don't apply to that we get billed for. Last year was the same thing.
Really?
I don't remember that.
Well, they
If
do
let's
the-
say we have a call with him that, that we need his services, a question, we'll get billed
Oh, I
for
see.
it.
I see, so it's
Yes.
on an individual.
So it's on this
Yes.
line item, but it's not necessarily 100% CAFR related.
Right.
I got it.
Ingrid, on page 6, under personal policy expenses, physical exams, that's a deficit of about 4,100.
That's new hires.
New
We've had a
hires.
lot of turnaround this year.
Okay.
And on that same section, a little bit lower down, labor negotiations, which was budgeted at $58,000, it looks like we've only used about 3.1%.
That's because Rich has done all the contracts.
Yes.
So is the expectation that that will be the case going forward for next year as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
If we need the lawyers.
Right. And a lot of these contracts we've locked in for 4 years, so my expectation is it will come in less than that.
Okay, put a pin in that.
Ingrid, page 7, under central facilities, maintenance, repair, rental property.
The same question.
We had lots of issues this year with our rental properties. We had chimney repairs. There was an emergency for Knights of Columbus. We had to convert a damaged tank, and it was $7,000. We had a furnace replacement, 15 Broadway, that was $5,000, and we've had several furnace and chimney repairs in those buildings.
Can't avoid it.
Yes.
Thank you.
comments from the other members?
On page 8, again, under police, I think I asked this question before about the dispatchers. So again, just to clarify, according to our employment table, we have 4 part-time dispatchers, which are budgeted at $80,000, and 8 full-time dispatchers, which are budgeted about $450,000. So this very first line, personnel part-time at $80,000, is this referring to the part-time dispatchers? And yet we're still only utilizing them at 12.4%?
That is, let me just read what the chief said. He did say that he was short on dispatchers, so they, this line, it's,
I thought
I don't
we
think
talked
it's
about this. I
full.
thought
We
for some
definitely
reason.
did. I'm just trying to understand whether
I
this is
thought for
the
some
result.
reason the money was in the overtime line. I just can't recall
well, the
why.
overtime line is, it's running a little bit high because when we run dispatchers that are full-time, if we're short on those dispatchers, so the part-time ones, they have to get overtime to compensate for that.
So they would be taking the place of a full-time employee, and then they have to be paid overtime?
Yes.
Okay, so that brings me to the next point, which is the overtime line for the police, which is currently running at 99.4%. And I think I read in the paper that there is a grant that is currently being utilized to pay for some of the overtime pay for the police that are working the overnight shifts in order to address some of the crime that's taking place during the evening. So
Yes,
that
that is not the dispatchers.
right. So
Right.
is that not offsetting this particular
Yes, it
line?
does. It does upset.
It does offset
Yeah.
it, and yet we're still at 99.4%?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know whether that grant is going into the next year, or is it ending with this fiscal year?
I think it varies, but I will have to look into that.
Okay.
There's a life cycle to it.
Right.
It may be just beyond the fiscal year,
Got
but I don't see it extending through this next fiscal year, so.
And on that next page, page 9, again, we had talked about this munis charge of about $30,000. At what point does that kick in?
Sorry, Nancy,
I
what was
spoke
that
on
again?
Munis.
Yeah,
Munis, the very bottom of the police section on page 9, the second to last line item, says
That was
munis.
meant to be for an implementation, so we'll have to make a decision by the end of the year on how that's going on. Munis.
Oh, so that's not definite? I thought that was training, no?
No, that was to implement.
Implementation, okay.
So what Ingrid is saying is that we could implement it this fiscal year, or we could save the money and carry it and then do
Right.
it next fiscal year, so.
Okay.
How old is the software?
How old?
Yeah.
It's the only software for all municipalities. But this,
So
this-
they just don't have the,
It's an
Well,
upgrade, you're saying, right?
yeah,
an
it's kind of an upgrade, right, for them.
okay. I have a question on page 10, the vehicle maintenance and repair for the animal control. Do we just have one vehicle or two?
What page, I'm sorry?
10.
We have 2, one new and one very
So
old.
this must be for the old
The
one.
older one, right.
I have a question on page 11 about overtime for Public Works.
Yes, the same.
There was one person out on medical leave, so they had, that's why.
I also noticed on page 12, under sanitation, the tipping fees, which is budgeted at about 1.1 million, is currently at 775. And if you were to, project that forward, multiplying by 12 and divided by 10, we still would be under that number. Now, I fully understand that we have Memorial Day right around the corner, so I'm sure that's going to be a little bit of a spike. But is that the expectation, is that that particular line item will probably come in under?
Yes. That line will come in under because we've been watching the market in terms of tip fees. We moved from $113 a ton to $103 a ton right now. So we're capturing the savings of watching the market rates, and the locations where the tip fees are cheaper that fall within an area that our drivers can drop the municipal waste off. So we're saving about $12 a ton right now for the time being. So I fully anticipate that line item will come in under.
And do you expect that is something that will be volatile from month to month, or we'll have to see?
I don't expect it to be volatile month to month, but I expect it to be volatile 6 months to 6 months, within a 6-month period.
Okay.
The volatility of it. Because what's happening, ladies and gentlemen, is that all the trash is being shipped out of state. There's no more really burn facilities other than one. And when you have trash being shipped out of state, the tip fees become inflated because the cost of the hauling, the diesel, and the cost of that gets built into the municipal tip fee rate. So that's why these tip fees have escalated as the burn facilities have dried up, and then we move forward to try to ship it out of state, not us, but the haulers. The fuel costs are reflected in our tip fees in all the municipalities. That's the way it works.
Okay. On page 14, under engineering, I'm just noticing overall, the total expenditure for that department is under 50%. I'm assuming that's from the unfilled position?
Yes, I think we're on the process of hiring.
So hopefully that'll be done sometime soon. Okay, great. But it hasn't been removed, because I think last year it was posted and then removed, and so now it's been added back in.
Yes.
We're close to hiring that position. It could
Great.
be June, which would mean we've saved 11 months of expenses
That would be
by
great.
not having hired the person.
Any final questions on the expenditure side?
Yeah, on page 16, under recreation, again, this kind of refers to the point that I made earlier. In speaking with Andy over at the rec center, I had heard that they have all the equipment and everything lined up to replace the roof over the pool. And so I'm just wondering, does this impact either the June budget for this year or the projected budget, both in terms of expenditures and revenue for recreation for next year? And in particular, I'm just a little bit curious about the line item, third to last, pool chemicals budgeted at $25,000, and we're currently only expended at 20%. It seems a little odd to me.
Why don't we talk about the roof replacement first, Ingrid? Do you have any information on that?
Yeah, well, so we've had the engineers look at the roof that's structurally becoming unsound. There was a bolt that came out of the ceiling that almost hit somebody. We've gone out to bid, and I believe the work to replace the roof would be starting right after the fiscal year. So the pool hours will be closed. We're making arrangements, Andy Delvecchio is, with, I think it's the YMCA, to have pool hours open there, that they're going to accommodate us, and our job is to get that roof structurally sound before it becomes a true safety hazard.
Agreed. And we have the debt to pay for it and the grant lined up, hopefully for reimbursement of at least a portion of those costs after it's completed. So that's great. But in terms of this particular budget for this year, any explanation, Ingrid, for the pool chemicals at being only 20%?
I'll have to talk to Andy. I did not look into that one.
I'll answer.
Yeah.
So, because we know what we've got going with the pool, we're monitoring the pool to see if we need to do the chemical application this fiscal year. So we're trying to, the reason there's no expense on that versus the budget is that it hasn't been done yet. We're trying to figure out whether we should do it this fiscal year or do it when the pool reopens in the next fiscal year.
We have to drain the pool to do the roof?
Not necessarily, no, because there'd be nobody in there, so, but the water would have to be replaced, because the roof, that replacement's gonna take, a while, so. In other words, let me rephrase it, just so everyone's clear. We're not sure if we should spend $29,000 on something that's gonna close in the very near future. And that's what we're evaluating right now.
All right, Mike, thank you.
And I have just one last question, and that's on page 17, related to insurance general for fire and liability. It's at a little under 60%. Is that something that is paid on a installment basis, a quarterly basis, or is that something that
I am looking
changes as
into
the
that
year
one.
goes on?
Which line item is that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
The liability
Page
workman's
17,
comp.
insurance general, SMP, fire and liability, the first line item. We're at 59.3%. And I know that there's been quite a bit of variability in this particular line item in terms of the expenditures. in the
Yes, I
last-
actually have reached out to see if we're missing any billing. I'm looking into that line.
Well, I know in the new budget, we did, that is a quote.
Yes, it is a quote.
So, I mean, we must be missing a billing or something here.
Right,
Yeah, I
I'm
think
looking
there's-
into
I
it.
think there's another payment before the end of the fiscal year on that.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Would that be it on the expenditures? Do you want to move to the Board of Ed?
Somewhere.
So it appears as though the Business and Operations Department is moving towards closing out current year with 2 months left. And they've itemized the balances on some of their special funds. And if we were to exclude the medical reserve account, which of course is something that has a great degree of, changeover on a very regular basis, and we just simply focused on the other ones, special education, capital, non-lapsing, and workers' comp, that's about $734,000 total. And then in addition to that, there's also this cafeteria and food services, in which they're bringing in an overall profit of about $89,000. It appears as though their overall budget, as of the end of April, is running at 79.1%. And it does have a $3.7 million encumbrance. So if we do my standard projection of taking the year-to-date actual, which is about $45 million, and you multiply it by 12 and divide by 10, that gets you to about $54 million, and then you add in that additional encumbrance of $3.7 million, that gets you to a total projected of about $57.7 million, and that compared to the budgeted amount of 61.6 gives an anticipated surplus of about $3.9 million.
I'm guessing that's an aggressive estimate.
Sure, no, again, it could change dramatically during the last 2 months of the year, but I just wanted to provide those numbers just as projections.
Okay, any of the members have comments, questions on the Board of Ed reports? Mr. Hallahan?
No, Board of Ed?
Yes, Board of Ed.
Yeah, it's good to see that they have quite a nice amount of money for their reserves for health. But the out-of-district tuition, is that figure before? Right now, it's running a $400,000 deficit. compared to what was budgeted in that line. Is that prior to reimbursement from the state, the grant programs?
I will have to ask the Board of Ed that question.
I didn't quite hear you, Ingrid.
That is quite out, it's quite out of whack there, that number.
Oh, I see what you're saying, 409.
Yeah.
Yep. Good point.
I mean, that's the only thing that really stood out to me.
Okay.
I was surprised that there was no mention of it in the narrative, but it may have been mentioned in a previous note to us that these figures, that they do some of the grant adjustments may occur late in the year.
Right.
Yeah, if you could just send out an email to us or something.
Sure.
Okay, hearing no other comments on the reports, I'll take a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay. Let's move on to item 4, which is the budget.
Ladies and gentlemen, is that a distraction to you hearing what's going on here? We want to get some air circulating in here. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the goal for the board tonight is to set a new budget, which hopefully can be acted on sometime in June, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. Of course, we're going to hear from all the members that wish to speak this evening. I did pass out, just prior to the meeting, a document which does have some proposed declinations on it. I'd like to go over those, if you don't mind. And then if you would allow me to go over those, then we can have comments on those later on, and any other discussion that the board would like to have on the proposed declinations. I'm going to sort of start at the bottom. The total of the proposed declinations is $1,988,820. And here they are. We're proposing a $15,000 cut to the personnel line in the public library. We are proposing a $92,570 reduction to the police full-time line, but I am going to come back to that, so hold that thought a little bit. Streets and roads, equipment rental, a reduction of $85,000. That is based on having less equipment, because the proposal, would be that we would do all the towns and leaf pickup at least once, but not all of them twice or 3 times, as some of the neighbors and neighborhoods get currently. We're proposing a $24,000 cut on the recreation part-time department. Under miscellaneous, we have the CBRA payment TIF, which is tax increment financing. The finance department looked into this item further and discovered that we had actually made our final payment on this item, so we are taking this out of the budget because we do not owe this money in the next fiscal year. We have some changes in the capital. Under the police department, we had some cruisers. We're taking 1 cruiser. There was, I think, 3 in the budget. We're taking 1 down, so $40,000 out of the budget. Each of those cruisers gets an emergency light bar and siren package. The associated light bar and siren package with that costs $30,000. That would be an additional cut. We had 2 fire engine leases in the budget. As I think we've mentioned, I think we didn't last meeting, but the lead time for fire equipment is very long. These 2 pieces of equipment have been expected for a long time. They were expected back in January. They were expected again, I think, in April or May. We now don't expect to get them until later in the summer. So in effect, this payment is getting pushed into the next year. It's already in this year's budget, so we are going to encumber this item in this year's budget and use the encumbrance to make the first payment when that occurs in sometime around the early part of the next fiscal year. So that will allow us to take this first payment out of the budget. We have a $13,500 cut to the Peters Rock line item, and we have a $70,000 cut to the jet vac lease. The Finance Department recently elected to pay off this lease, which they have either done or are about to do. It's the final payment, so that will occur in this current fiscal year, so we have the ability to take it out for next year. And there is a substantial budget to the Board of Ed of $1.2 million. As I think everyone in the room knows, the Board of Ed will make the decision as to where they'd like to have those cuts be, but I think the thought process amongst at least some of the members of the board was that the Board of Ed does have significant medical reserves. Mike just mentioned that a moment ago. It actually came up at one of our meetings earlier in the year, and we were given a status update on the reserves. So we believe they have the ability to take most of this cut out of the medical reserves, but where the cuts actually get made is up to the discretion of the Board of Ed. Now, I would like to go back, if you don't mind, to the police personnel for just a moment. So the reduction I mentioned, $92,570, is the approximate cost of the two half-year officers, which equates to 1 FTE. So they are coming out of the budget, but the proposal here is to continue to list them in the employment tables as a half-year FTE with zero amount budgeted against them, which I believe we did last year for the Finance Department. We've had discussions, Mike has really, with the police chief. He believes that he can more than offset the cost of the police officers via his budget. He has that ability. Of course, if he goes over his budget, he's going to have to come in front of this board to get funding for the positions. But he believes he has enough cuts to fund those next year in the event that he'd like to add those two half FTEs. Sorry, Mike, just one more thing, and just for the members, the two first items on here, which you've noticed, I'm sure, that they cancel each other out. It was the police pension accrual of $39,847, which was a negative number, and the police personnel full-time, that's just a correction that either Ingrid or Rich figured out. So there's obviously no effect on the budget. It's just a correction to the line items. And I think Mike wanted to say something about the police officers.
Yeah, so on the police department, to summarize what Tim said, the chief can offset the expense of the two officers in other areas of his budget. So we keep the two officers in the budget. We will at least reduce that expense in other areas that the police chief knows he can do. You see, what a lot of people need to know is that the hottest topic in town right now is public safety with police. Police is the big issue. All over the state. Today I was in Stamford. I was over at Medtronics today with their executives, our police chief. People are asking, what's going on with North Haven and Universal Drive in particular? So this is why the police chief and I decided that we're going to keep the two officers in. But we're not going to add the expense. We're going to take the expense out in other areas. So that's why these two officers are in. We need more officers on Universal Drive. That is the specific need right now. And that's where these two officers will go.
I'll make one final comment, and then certainly would like to hear from the board members. Were these changes to be made, and again, just to repeat the number of $1,988,820, our projection is that the mill rate for the ensuing fiscal year would be 34.68, which would be a 2.03 mill increase, and that was opposed to the 2.65, which was rejected yesterday. So about a 0.63 mill rate reduction is what we believe these would come out at. So, having said all that, I'm more than glad, as I'm sure the audience would, to hear from the members.
I just have a few questions, and then I'll make a few comments. But first of all, regarding the 2 half-year police officers, meaning 1 FTE, what you're saying is you're going to change the employment table, but not change the budget in order to reflect both their salaries and all the costs of
No,
all
he will,
of their
the
benefits.
budget will be reduced by the amount that's in here, the 92,570.
Right. So both their salaries and the benefits add up to 92,570?
That's what I'm told, yes.
Okay. But you will change the employment table, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Because there has been some confusion about the police department employment table in the past, so I think this idea of changing the employment table and not really having it as a budgeted line item.
Well, just to be clear, the positions will be listed in the employment table at $0.
Okay. And regarding the fire department, the 2 engines.
Yes.
Which we have been paying towards the leasing amount in anticipation of the delivery of these 2 engines.
No, this is new engines, right?
These are
the
new engines.
Right. We're not, this is.
The ones
this
that
is
we're
the-
leasing are
the-
going into his maintenance line.
This would be the first payment. We expected the engines to come in this year. We budgeted, sorry, let me back up what I said. This was actually the second payment. Okay, so we budgeted for them to be delivered this year. Okay, and they're not going to be delivered this year. This would have been the second payment. So we're going to encumber this year's budget for the $300,000 payment, the first payment due under the lease, but that payment isn't due till roughly August or so. In which case, it allows us to not have to budget for the $300,000 payment for next year.
So an encumbrance in this year will be carried into the following budget. I
Yes,
wasn't
Yes.
sure that you could do that.
yes, we could reserve, yeah.
Okay.
We do that with most of our capital items.
And-
Well, we have, sorry for interrupting.
Sure, go ahead.
My recollection is, I think we have, you're going to have to correct me, Ingrid, 60 or 90 days after the end of the year for bills that come in, that can still be put into the prior fiscal year, correct?
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
Right, but you're still paying for those encumbrances with the budget from the previous year.
That's what we're talking
Right.
about. That's what I
Yes.
just said.
Okay, so it would still be charged against this year, not
Yes.
charged against next year?
Yes.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay, now I understand. And with respect to those 2 fire trucks, those are the 2 new ones that we're waiting for. In the meantime, we are in fact leasing 2 fire trucks.
Right.
So will there be just a trade-off of we no longer are leasing those 2 as soon as we take possession of the 2 new ones? And
It's a
will there
full
be trade-off
payout
of
lease.
the
We own
dollars?
them. We own them. It's
Yeah.
not like a lease where you turn it back into the manufacturer. That's not what this is.
No,
It's
no,
a-
I
it's a
I understand. The ones that we're waiting for is lease to own. But currently, in anticipation of those 2 new engines,
We
we are
own-
currently leasing 2
No.
additional engines.
We are
We
leasing
own
some.
the engines. They're called, it's a municipal lease. It's a dollar out lease. We own them.
We are leasing one. It is charged in their maintenance line.
Yeah, it's a month-to-month lease.
Right, and I believe the chief reduced it by that amount when he presented the budget.
And when we take possession of the new ones, which will be leased to own,
I will have to
those
ask
will
the
no
chief,
longer
I
be
guess.
leased.
I assume somebody will make
Okay,
sure for
that
you.
that is an important point. Okay.
All right, other members have comments?
Yeah, of course, we are, a couple of us are just reacting to the list of reductions that we just received. We weren't certain how much it would be or where it would be from. And it's pretty obvious that no one's going to be happy in a situation like this. It looks like the impact on services will mostly be to the library and the rec center. And a great deal of our public uses these services. And I know it was sort of forewarned to the public that if the budget went down, there would be implications, a cost to pay, a cost of making changes. And that is unfortunate. There's two major issues that stick out with this, with the reductions here of almost $2 million. One is that the Board of Ed seems to be taking most of the punishment, most of the impact on these reductions. Over half of the cost of these reductions is to be burdened by the Board of Ed, and $1.2 million is a lot for them to shave off, to sacrifice and make changes regarding. And so I don't think that that's something we really should, we should try to see if that could be mitigated at all before leaving tonight.
I agree.
In some way. And
Do you mind if I say something on that? And I think the
Okay.
First Selectman as well.
Yeah.
I happened to have a conversation with the chairman of the Board of Ed, who's here with us this evening, and he expressed almost the same sentiment, Mike.
Yeah.
I guess I would say this. I don't think, and by the way, I should add that some of the letters that we got, I was able to read them just before the meeting, said something similar to what you just did. So there's other people, at least of the 11, we got letters that had the same thought. I don't think we ever promised anyone that to the extent we'd have cuts, they'd be pro rata, okay? They're not pro rata amongst the departments within the town, okay? It's easier to focus on the Board of Ed because it's a big number, it's a big block, and makes up roughly half of this. And I think if you look at the services, and I think Michael's going to comment on this, you could argue that on the service side of the town, they're getting hurt a little bit more. Now, we don't know how the Board of Ed will address the cut. It's a large cut, don't get me wrong, I understand that. But I guess I believe, I won't speak for the other members, that most of that can be handled by reducing their reserves and their insurance funds.
So let me comment. So, the public should know that Patrick, myself, and Christian, we meet on a regular basis. Ron Bathrick and I, the chairman, speak on a regular basis. So, on the town side, services are going to be affected with that $787,000. The town has 0 reserves on insurance. The Board of Education has $3.2 million in reserves. So, and we'll have subsequent discussions, the superintendent and I with Christian, that if the $1.2 million out of the $3.2 million in insurance reserves gets reduced to $2 million, that's still a healthy reserve. No effect on operations. No teachers being laid off, no positions being asked to be reduced. It's coming out of the insurance reserve. The reserves are based on if there's catastrophes and you go over your monthly allocation, you got to dip in the reserves. If, in the event that, and this is a highly unlikely event, that the $2 million that potentially is left over after a $1.2 million withdrawal, if in the event there's a catastrophe and the $2 million is not enough, the town's going to backfill what the Board of Ed needs anyway out of the general fund. So if the $1.2 million comes out of insurance reserves, there's no change in education. There's no service reduction. It's all coming out of a line that's in an insurance reserve. And again, the town has, actually it's less than 0. We're in a negative number on reserves. So in other words, we've got to be very careful on the town side that the claims history matches up to the monthly budget, month by month, in terms of what we put in. The Board of Ed has done a great job on the reserves, but it's $3.2 million. So all we're saying here is if the board chooses to take the 1.2 out of the 3.2 million, they still have $2 million left in reserves. We're going to backfill the Board of Ed. We've got their backs on that, so to speak, if there's catastrophes. And there'll be no changes in the education system, operationally. versus other cities and towns that are laying teachers off.
Yeah, I want to thank and acknowledge the letters that we've received. We received 10 of them. 9 of them asked us not to cut education at all, let alone 1.2 million. The other one really supported more of the fire department, but the letters came in from Georgiana Acabo, Gary George, Thais Moore, Michelle Guglielmo, Amanda and Tim Gabriel, Jamie Kazmarek, Benjamin Lobick, Krista Kaplan, Krista Kaplan, and Nick Gill. So we did read and absorb them in the brief time we were here before the meeting. And we want to thank them all and all the public's input that really care about our school system, our district, and want to see it adequately funded into the future.
So, Mike, let me add this. So, I received an email or a text message earlier about us, the Board of Finance, making a decision before public comment. So that's what's going to happen here tonight. But when I come back to present that budget on or about June 10th, there will be time for the public to weigh in on this revised budget. So this decision tonight is not necessarily the final decision that's going to go to referendum, because we're going to look to see what the public feedback is at the next town budget hearing.
Mike, did you have more you want?
Yeah. So the other item that was really glaring here is the omission at the moment for any changes in revenue items. And while the Board of Ed has $3 million plus in reserves for medical insurance costs, the town itself does have a fund balance, does have reserves that could be used in a situation like this to help to dull the pain of what we're going through here. And I think that the absence of use of the fund balance, right now, originally in the budget, $250,000 was to be taken out of fund balance. To not increase that at all, and to have the Board of Ed cut from a 5.4% increase to a 3.4% increase, while on the town side, it's going from just a 0.5% down, 8.4 to 7.9. And the town, by the way, is only taking a cut of $305,000. 483 is out of capital. And I just don't think we right now have the right balance of income and expenditures regarding these cuts. And I'd like to be able to discuss that further.
Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, don't the rating agencies
Yes,
want to see a certain level
of course.
of the fund balance?
Of course, and that's why we limit usage of the fund balance. But I imagine there are many different components to a rating agency's evaluation of our town, including how adequate are the medical reserves in the Board of Ed budget, whether we're paying for OPEB or our other obligations to our current and past employees. So I just think there's just so many aspects to the rating agency's view of North Haven. I know in the past, the First Selectman has mentioned that that at times they do want to see a slight increase in the mill rate to show the public's ability to support a continuation of the services to the town in the future. And so I understand the many facets of it, but I think if the fund balance is utilized a little bit more than $250,000, I don't believe it's going to have a definite impact on our AAA rating. I'm not an expert in that field, but no one knows for sure when and how a rating will change on the town. But we do know that certain components are critical. One of them is fund balance, and I just don't believe. I think we can utilize it a little bit more than $250,000 in a situation where education at this moment is being cut by more than $1 million.
So Mike, did you have a suggested number?
I'd like to request a 10-minute recess.
Let's do that, but let's just see if the other members.
Yeah, I'd
Let's
like
give-
to, yeah,
let's just give-
can I comment?
Please.
Yeah.
So I'm commenting on what you said, Mike. So we've been here for many years, and we hear what Mr. Frieda is hearing from the rating agencies. So yes, that you're making a point. However, with the explanation of the reserves that they have, it's not cutting teachers, it's not cutting funding for the Board of Ed. And if there are reserves, they're like catastrophic, again, we're going through this again, the town has to pick it up. And by having a decent fund balance, our ability to borrow is better for the town. So we've had this conversation many times, and we're having it again, and I'm repeating it again. So I know you guys are gonna come up with something else, but we have to be clear that the message people understand. You're saying right away, cut Board of Ed. Okay, so people think we're cutting it, teachers, programs, it's reserves. People might not understand. It's been explained multiple times. So to come and say, well, we're gonna cut them, we're not, and if the reserves are a problem, the town has to figure it out. But our ability to borrow is something that's been mentioned again, year after year. So I'm just saying my
Yeah.
piece of the pie.
Right, and just to clarify, I'm not, I understand that the Board of Ed needs to take, or will be forced to take a reduction after the town budget was not approved yesterday. The 1.2 million, again, given the amount of increase on either side of the ledger, it appears to be excessive.
And Mike, I'm sorry, go ahead, finish up.
My last comment is, you've been on the medical, you've met with the carriers on both sides for years. You were a part of that little team, so you know how it
Hey, I'm on
works.
part of that little team too.
Yeah, I know, but yeah.
Very little.
So you always ask for the meeting, you get the meeting, and one of the things I hear you say too, let's look at the reserves, let's meet with the insurance carriers, what are we doing? So,
Right.
So it's kind of like it's a little conflict for me from how you say that publicly often and ask about that, and then right away you made the comment about cutting in the Board of Ed, and then somebody on TV who flips for 2 minutes is gonna say, oh my God, and not hear the real story.
Yeah.
Then I'm done, that's my speech.
Thank you to the first selectman for setting up the meeting with the insurance agents. That was very enlightening. And for that reason, because of that, I'm not asking for any cut to the town side of medical insurance.
Mike, one second. One second. We have some seats in front, or if you want to take a couple seats in the back, feel free.
So let me explain one other thing, ladies and gentlemen, that in the event of a catastrophe, the town will backfill the 2 million and whatever the needs are. That's got to come out of the fund balance. But on the rating agency side, I'd like to have everyone understand this, that it's very important to maintain this AAA rating, because if we look into the future here, the largest bonding that the town will need is going to be for the Board of Education. We have 4 elementary schools that are very, very old. So we've done a lot on the town side, paved roads, built a new police department. put an elevator in the back here, built 4 new firehouses. We're renovating the pool roof. But the future, the reason why I'm looking ahead in the future here, the reason why the rating, the AAA rating is important, and we got to boost this fund balance up, this is why we're only assigning $250,000 in this next fiscal year, is because I know, I've worked with Patrick and Christian, I know it's coming down. There are major renovations that are needed at a couple of these elementary schools. So that's why it's important to make the AAA rated bonding allows us to borrow at the lowest interest rates. So we're supporting the Board of Education because I know what the future is going to bring. Problems that currently exist in the elementary schools that are going to need to be addressed.
Mike, before we recess, I just want to make sure the other members have a chance to comment. So Lori, Jean, or Bob, did you have any questions or comments?
No.
No, I agree with the way things have worked out here. It is unfortunate that there is a big chunk of change there from the Board of Ed, but I totally understand where it's coming from.
I likewise agree with what's being proposed.
Okay, Mike, 10, 15 minutes, how much time would you like?
Could I make a few comments before we
Yeah,
recess?
go right ahead, sure.
So, just backing up a little bit to the very beginning, I'd just like to say, while the turnout was higher than last year for the referendum at 1,300 rather than last year was 700, the outcome, as we know, was very close. It was a margin of just 79 votes, as the chairman mentioned. So we are then in this precarious position of trying to interpret what that means. So 610 people said yes to that budget, that proposed budget, and 689 people said no. So I think from the yes votes, some of them, it's allegiance to Mr. Frieda. For many of them, I believe it was support of educational funding. Many of the people that I spoke to yesterday, standing out in front of the rec center for a few hours, really just thought that the overall magnitude of the budget and the associated tax rate was just a little bit too high, and many of them said enough is enough. So I think the message is clear to this board that we have the responsibility to try to make changes to this budget that ultimately result in a lower tax rate. But I think that we actually have two objectives. One is to make changes to both sides of the ledger, both to reduce the expenditures and to increase revenue in order to reduce the mill rate, but also, or at least reduce the mill rate increase. And then secondly, to establish a reasonable baseline of expenditures for next year, because we don't want to be hamstrung and be facing this exact same situation next year when we may need to be making additional, significant changes. So I think that we really need to be creative, and I think we have to have an open mind when we are facing a very unusual year in which we look at both the expenditures and the revenue side of the budget. And I have to agree that it seems unfair to be making this size of a reduction to the Board of Ed budget because, again, we can't determine exactly where it is cut, so it might very well impact teachers and students. So I certainly have put a lot of time into coming up with some suggestions, and after we take a brief recess, I'd like to share some of those suggestions in hopes that we can change how we share the changes in expenditures among the town, capital, and Board of Ed. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Nancy. Mike, how much time do you need, 10, 15 minutes? 15?
I'm hoping for 10. It may end up being 15, but we're looking at 10.
All right, so why don't we say it's 7:40, why don't we say 7:55?
Okay.
15-minute recess. Thank you. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
All right, thank you, everyone. We're going to continue our meeting. Mr. Frieda's going to rejoin us in 1 second. Mike, he's going to see what he can figure out about the ECS. So why don't I defer to Mike and/or Nancy? I think they may have a couple ideas. We'd like to hear them out.
Yeah, I would like to put,
Okay, I'm sorry, Mike, if you don't mind. Just for the member's sake and for Ingrid's sake, if we, when we have suggested either cuts and/or increases of revenue, let's just make sure we're clear. We will summarize, of course, later, but Ingrid's gonna get stuck tracking this, so let's just make sure that we're clear when we make our suggestions, please. But please, Mike, go ahead.
okay, yeah, I'm going to end up making two motions, but we can just, I'll make the motion and then we can discuss. I would like to, for revenue, increase the line item for interest on short-term investments from $750,000 to $950,000, a change of $200,000. And on the other side of the ledger, eliminate the reductions to public library by $15,000, to recreation, eliminate the $24,000 cut, and to use the rest to reduce the mill rate below 2. So the remainder would just be revenue that would not be implicated in the cuts that are listed here.
All right, I
So
think...
those are the 3 line items I'm asking to change.
Well, I think before we have any motions, I'd like to hear from all the members as to what their various ideas are, rather than take them piecemeal.
I will pause my motion.
Well, there's no motion on the table, but nevertheless, I guess it'd be helpful for the members to hear any other suggestions you may have or any of the other members may have.
So you want me to go through the whole list,
Well, let's
both
let Mike
revenue
finish.
and
Let's let-
expenditures?
Let's let Mike finish first.
Yeah, well, it's one and the same.
No, well, that's the part I'd just like to put out for discussion at this moment. I would like to segment it.
Okay.
Why can't we hear the whole?
I don't have any comment until I hear the...
Yeah, I
I'm
wanna
not
hear
going to
the
vote on one item and go through them piecemeal.
That's what
I want to know what the package is.
Right, I agree.
So the interest on short-term investment is currently budgeted at $750, and in our current fiscal year budget, we're running at about $944,319. So if in fact we can utilize the exact same mechanisms in next fiscal year, an increase to $950 seems reasonable.
Look, as we all know, it's a little bit of guesswork on a lot of these numbers,
Sure, of course.
to be honest, right? The reason that number's less, not that I'm unwilling personally as a sole member of this to move that, the reason obviously that number is less is because the Federal Reserve have been signaling that they would start reducing rates this year, which hasn't happened. So there may be some logic to moving that one up.
So you want me to go through the whole list?
Well, why don't you just tell them what the forecast was from CCM for the...
Okay, so one of the first things
PCS.
that I came across was for educational cost sharing. Now, this is revenue that comes from the state of Connecticut. It comes to the town and helps us to fund education. And this has to be distinguished from excess cost grant that goes directly to the Board of Ed. So in 23-24, we budgeted about $4.1 million and 4.182. And as we just indicated in the review of our income statement, we actually received 99.5% of what we budgeted, so $4,160,000. In 2024-25, we are only budgeting $4.4 million. Now, it's an increase, but as I mentioned before, the state actually puts together a 2-year budget. So I'd like to pass along, if I could, down the line. This is a printout of, and if you look at the last two columns, this is the adopted budget that was adopted last June. And the amount that was allocated for the town of North Haven, in particular, for educational cost sharing was actually $4,618,266. So I'm going to recommend that we increase our budget for this revenue line item by $200,000. Again, because we did receive just about every penny that we budgeted this year. So I think we should increase our revenue expectations for next year. So that's item number one, if everyone wants to take a look at that. Next,
Can we just pause there for a
Sure, of
second,
course.
please? All right, so the budget's 4,000,000, call it 4,000,004 for conversation.
4.4, yep.
Right.
And I'd like to increase it to 4.6.
All right, so what I'd like to do is, I just talked to CCM, they're saying it's at 4.4, so I've got to check the validity of this. Because what happened at the state level, there was a movement to increase ECS at the expense of something else. But there was a veto there. I'm not sure who vetoed what. I don't know if it was Governor Lamont vetoing it or he got vetoed. So, folks, just so you know, I'm past president of CCM. I'm on the executive board. I'm on the finance committee. So I'm not going to dismiss this document. But they just told me it's 4.4. So I think we got to get this really straightened out.
Okay?
I guess I would add that what we do tonight is to set the expenditure side of the budget again. So while we could make the adjustments that we're talking about, if we don't make them tonight because there's uncertainty on ECS, I think we can, yes, we could do that at our next meeting, because we vote on the expense side of the budget, not the revenue side.
We do, but I think it is short-sighted to be able to only focus on one side of the ledger. Ultimately, we are responsible for proposing the entirety of the budget. And I think that in order to understand the expenditures, you have to also understand the revenue side and how that can offset some of the expenditures and can certainly reduce the mill rate. So I don't know how we reduce the mill rate if we're not acknowledging both sides, both sets of
What I'm
changes.
saying, Nancy, is that whenever our meeting is in June, if this proves out that in fact we are getting more, then we could adjust the revenue side then when we set the mill rate.
But I have several several revenue proposals and several expenditure proposals.
My comment doesn't preclude your other suggestions. I'm just saying, we've just heard yourself say that we're getting more, and you have a document. Mike has checked with CCM, and they're saying no. So me, being in the middle, figuratively and literally between the two of you,
Literally.
I don't know whether or not this is valid or not. I guess what I'm saying is, I think we have the luxury, either way, of proving this out, because I think because we only really have the voters vote on the expense side, and we set the mill rate based on our expectation of revenues, that if this did in fact prove out, we could make the revenue adjustment at our June meeting, which would, of course, lower the mill rate.
Can I ask, what was the date of this report? Do you know? When did you see this?
I saw this very recently, within the last week or two.
Okay. All right.
All right, I guess you had some
And
others?
I have the source down at the bottom of the
Yeah,
page.
she said.
So again, I don't know exactly how we can vote on the expenditures and actually set the mill rate this evening unless we're also...
We don't set the mill rate tonight.
Well, again, how can we have a budget that ultimately is presented to the public unless we're agreeing on both sides of the ledger? But let me go through and I'll present everything and we can make notes and discuss it.
Nancy, before you do that, we don't want to stop you from doing that, but you got this from a June 6, 2003 biennial budget? Because that's what it says here.
No. It's referring to the June 6th, 2023 biannual budget. So a year ago, when the government met to set the budget for the entire state for 2 years, that occurred in June of 2023, that is what they ultimately determined, which was the budget for this fiscal year and for next fiscal year.
Yeah, I think I see the issue here, the confusion, that this has changed. So this, what Nancy's saying is this was a biennial budget that was stated on June 6, 2003. Things have changed since then. But
2023.
2023, June 6, 2023. I'll still refer to this back to CCM, but I have the hard copy of the FY '25, which shows the almost 4 million. And I just talked to somebody after that. They said that's what it is, but we'll check this out, okay?
Sure.
So,
Okay. And again, the 4.4 million is an increase, and that's what the governor had assured you, was that ECS would increase, but it's just a question of by how much.
yeah, so when the governor told me that, it's a couple $100,000, which is what's reflected in this budget. This, I really believe, looking at this now and reading the footnote that was written here, this is antiquated, but I'm gonna confirm it.
Okay.
I will just say this, Nancy, and of course I'll let you go on, but historically, what we would get would be a document from the Office of Management and Budget, which would come around this time of year, although sometimes it would come later, which would tell us exactly what we were getting in state funding in the next fiscal year. I don't know if that's a document we can obtain or not.
I have it.
Okay, well, there you go.
So,
No, that's what I'm saying, is I don't know why this is something that is even a big mystery, because it's set, and it's set for 2 years. So
Well,
it should be something that's pretty transparent. Okay, so in addition to the ECS change in the revenue, again, my goal is to have changes on both revenue and expenditures so that we can change the various combinations of how the town, capital, and Board of Ed are sharing the changes to reduce their mill rate. Okay, so interest in short-term investment, we had budgeted $750,000. As we all commented earlier, it's currently running as of the end of April at $944,319. So it's my recommendation that conservatively we can bump that up by an additional $200,000 to from $750 to $950. Mr. Frieda, do you think that that is a reasonable estimate for next year, given the types of financing that you're currently involved in, or is this something where you're utilizing the debt that we've just taken out, and that won't be able to be accessible again next year?
so you're referring to interest income, right?
Yes, exactly.
So look, I think if we knew the rates were going to stay at 5 to 5.5 in that range, I'd be very comfortable with that. But we don't know if the rates drop. We could put in a number that we can't reach, and then we're going to run a deficit in that line. So that's the thing, it's really, we watch this closely. The Fed is looking at, and Tim knows this being in the banking business, Wall Street reacted, these past, about a week and a half ago, they reacted to the notion that the Fed was looking to cut rates. So to put in another $200,000, that makes an assumption that we're going to still stay at the 5.3, 5.5 interest rates we have, when one of our investment strategies has reduced the rate already to a little bit lower than 5, I think. I don't have the exact numbers. So, you put it in, we don't make it, then we got a deficit. That's the roll of the dice. And, I don't think interest rates are going up. If anything, they're going to go down.
So Mike Callahan, just to clarify, Nancy just suggested 200, you suggested 150, correct?
No, I was at 200 also.
Okay.
We recorded 168,000 of income last month on that line item. And while that might really represent more than 30 days worth of interest,
It does.
yeah, to me, I think it's tracking where it could end up over $1 million this year.
It probably will, but the question is, what's it going to be next year? So I got the idea. Let's move on to the next item.
Okay. So again, under tax collector interests and liens, we are currently budgeted at 600,000, and currently it is running at 718,000. So I think, again, with 2 full months left in the year, I think that it is perfectly reasonable to bump that from 600,000 to 725. Any thoughts? Bless you.
Well, we have our tax collector here, so.
So we budgeted 600, you're asking for 7.25.
So a change of 125. Any more discussion, or should I move on?
I'm just trying to find on the revenue side.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Where is it? Is it on page 2? No, it's on page 1, I got it.
I have it.
Okay, so we're at 718. I'm guessing that that line is dominated, by the lien collection, right? I mean, we know the interest is 18%, but there was a movement to cut that. It failed, by the way, in the legislature. But I'm assuming that line is relatively volatile because you got to collect on the lien, right, to get the interest, right? Okay, let's move on.
Okay. And one other point that, again, I think we discussed during our review of the budget was building fees. Again, I think we've budgeted both for this year and next $1.4 million, but we also noticed that by the end of April, we were at 95% of what we had budgeted. So I think that's a very good thing for this town. It reflects very well on our overall growth pattern. And so I think it's reasonable to bump that up by 5% and another $100,000.
I'm sorry, you said how much?
100,000.
So from $1.4 million to $1.5 million, you're suggesting?
Exactly.
Okay.
And one other thing, again, this may be tossed out because it's relatively small amount, but the federal and state of Connecticut telecommunications access line, currently budgeted at $50,000. We've received $83,000. I'd like to change that from a budget of $50,000 to a budget of $75,000, so a change of $25,000.
Okay.
And last but not least is I think that we need to revisit this issue of the fund balance transfer. I think that when we are considering not the all or nothing of AAA bond rating or nothing, but perhaps AAA bond rating versus what is the next smallest incremental decrease below that, and what will be the very tiny change in our borrowing rate as a result of that, and how could that same amount of money then be utilized in education or perhaps on the town side or in capital. I think that we have to weigh these priorities, and so I think in our current budget, I believe we have a fund balance transfer of about $1.6 million, and we have reduced that to only $250,000 for the proposed budget. So I'd like to recommend just a very small change of just $250,000 to get it up to $500,000. If anybody has a suggestion for a larger amount, I'm certainly open to it. And the last thing I'd like to say about this is, just like last year and potentially just like this year, we can include this in the budget, see how the year goes. If we get to the end of the year, and we've been very fortunate in managing individual departments and we're actually running a surplus, we don't have to collect this amount of money. And it's not such a large amount that we're really stuck. So that would be my recommendation in terms of the revenue side of the budget.
Okay.
Any thoughts?
Yes, open up for comments.
So, look, Tim and I have been talking about this for quite some time. And We just spoke here with the other members. I might be inclined to go along with this, because
Excuse me, fund balance.
fund balance, yes, fund balance. So, because I'm the person that deals with the rating agencies, and I have been put on notice that this is a red flag. And AAA rated municipalities now are in the 15 to 20% fund balance rate. We score lowest among our peers group, as I've said many times here, in that category. But we score among the highest of our peer group on what they say is leadership, management, and economic development. So we've been able to offset the lower fund balance. So when I look at this in a very reasonable fashion, if we went up to 250,000, which has been suggested here, I think I can sell that to the rating agencies, because it's half of what we did the previous year. So I can show them that we're gradually weaning off. So I'd be on board with raising that. I think I can get by, but not much more. In other words, if the proposals here were, let's put the money back, $1,135,000, or that number there that's in there, I can't sell that to the rating agencies. But I think we can raise it a little bit and still show that we're weaning off it, so to speak. And I think they would buy into it. Tim?
I agree. I was actually thinking of something else as you were talking, Mike. I looked at some of the line items, look, it's hard for all of us, even here on this board, to come up with the right revenue numbers and the right expense numbers. The expense numbers are, I won't say easier, but we have help from the department heads, and there's more certainty to a wage, obviously, than there is short-term interest rates, right? But one of, I think, the dangers sometimes when you talk about a topic like revenue is we look at certain things. I do the same thing, I'm sure, but I guess what I was looking at while Mike was talking would be some of the other items in the budget right now. I mean, a lot of these are up, a lot of these, not the budget, I'm sorry, the actual year-to-date numbers. Some are up and some are down, right? Town clerk fees, for instance, by the way, through 10 months, we've collected $475,000, about 63%. So we're running behind in that category. Quinnipiac University, we've talked about it at some other meetings. That money may not come this year. I know Mike has expressed some confidence that we may get it next year, but some other lines may run behind while others do well. That's just the nature of any kind of budget, especially on the revenue side. Go right ahead.
Yeah, so I'm confident on the Quinnipiac University pilot payment. I have a meeting with the president first week of June. But I just want to explain why you may have seen me hesitate on some of the proposals on raising some of the line items. You may or may not know that the state of Connecticut has just appointed me to be a member of a municipal review board for distressed municipalities. The governor himself asked me to sit on that because they like the way North Haven's run financially. And one of the biggest consistent things that I've seen in terms of municipalities that get into trouble is they overestimate their revenue and they can't deliver on it. And that causes deficits that build over years. So I only hesitated on some of the proposals, not necessarily the fund balance, because I think we can get by with that. But one of the keys that I see is the municipalities that are distressed, like I said, they overestimate the revenue and they can't deliver on it. And that's a problem, folks. So
I have to say, I've been on this board a long time, and I'm sure when I got here I focused on the expense side, but I guess I learned the lesson that Mike just mentioned a long time ago, that that's actually where you tend to get in trouble on the revenue side. You can cut expenses. Some of them are more fixed than others, right? But if you go high on the revenue, then you can often have problems. Here's going to be my suggestion, but I want to make sure the other members have a minute to comment if they like. But I think I need another 10-minute recess. But before we do that, I just want to see if the other members have any questions or comments.
So I do have a whole list of suggested reductions, but
I
I'd
thought
love
you
to
were
be able
done.
to hear about the revenues first.
I have
I
a
thought-
concern about the revenue, Tim, just like
Go
you
ahead.
do. I come from a background in nonprofits. and you don't project money that is not gonna be there. You have to really be certain that, you know, your sponsorships are there, or however our taxes work for here. So I think we have to be very conservative when we're looking at revenue coming in.
No, I agree, and that's why I try whenever possible to use 5-year lookbacks, and as well as, most importantly, the most current fiscal year and how we've been doing. And I think that's the best predictor of how we're going to be doing going forward. I think many of our revenue projections look very optimistic and very promising. I agree with you, we don't want to be overly optimistic. We do have a fiduciary responsibility, but I think it would also be unfortunate to be underestimating those revenue projections at the cost of increasing the taxpayer or the tax levy. And I think Mr. Frieda would also agree that many of the municipalities that get into trouble, in addition to trying to, overestimate their revenue stream, I think they also get into trouble when they don't set aside sufficient funds for pensions, for example. And I think that this town has done a very good job of setting aside money in a variety of different ways that cover not only pensions, but also setting aside money when contracts are renewed, and we have the money to actually pay retroactively those CBAs. So I think that that all of those things actually work in our favor in terms of a bond rating.
So I have a question for you, Nancy. Exactly, what's your goal? So you gave us revenue, now what do you have for expenses? Maybe just like, what's the tally of?
Sure.
total?
So I just tallied up the revenue side. Let's see, ECS was 200, fund balance was 250, telecommunications was 25, interest on short-term investment was 200, tax collector interest and liens was 125, and building fees was 100, and I believe that totals $720,000 on the revenue side of the budget.
Okay, what's the total on the expense side?
And on the expense side, let's see, 125. About 265.
How many, is it a lot of little
No,
things?
it's 4 things.
Okay.
Yep.
Let me just, I'm sorry, I want to do that, please, Nancy, but
Yeah.
just to make sure I got the right number. So, tax collector, you had 125, right? Building fees, 100.
Yep.
It was the,
Interest on short-term investments
was
200.
200.
Yep.
You had 25 on the access line, right?
Yep.
So 200, 300, 425, 475, is that what you said?
1, 2, 25, 425, and the 450 so far.
475, right?
No,
450, yep, 450.
450. And then
And then the
fund balance transfer of 250.
Yep, I got that.
And then educational cost sharing of 200.
Okay.
Right?
Can I make a comment on
Please.
the interest on short-term investment? I think going up 200,000 could be unrealistic and overly optimistic. I would opt for maybe 100,000, but not 200.
Okay.
I think there's just too many unknowns. We don't know what the Federal Reserves are going to do.
Right. Yeah, it was really just trying to project 10 months of this year onto 12 months of next year. That's really where I came up with that number.
What was that number again?
650, right?
650?
So, let's see, going from 750 to 950, and we're currently running at 944.
Yeah, I
Okay.
don't think, I think you're going to see some
As of the end of
changes for
April,
this
I should
coming
say.
year.
As of the end of April, we're at 944. So if you multiply that by 12 and divide by 10, it's about 1.1
So you're going
million.
up by 2, and then the proposal was to go up by 100, right?
The counter proposal
Yeah,
is
the
by-
counter proposal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, so why don't you hit us with the expense cuts, please?
Sure. Under personnel policy expenses, I think we discussed this earlier, the labor negotiations were at about 3% this year, And so, since I think we've gone through all of the CBAs, they're all renewed, I don't expect that there really should be a whole lot of labor negotiations next year. So we've only spent about $1,800 this year, so I'd like to reduce the labor negotiations line item from $75,000 down to $25,000, so that's a savings of $50,000.
I did mention this before. We are going to, we will need the lawyers next year for pension documents. So that's why we kept that number.
Right.
Yeah, so what that means, what Ingrid is saying, is we're updating our pension documents to be in compliance with the IRS changes. These are older documents that we really have to get up to that.
To IRS code, yes.
Yes.
And we
So-
need the lawyers for that.
And we need the lawyers in
We
order,
will need lawyers for that, yes.
for up to $75,000.
We don't know how much.
That's the
yes,
question. Well, we'll just tell them, that's all we're gonna pay them.
Yeah, good luck
That
with
would
that.
be nice if it
That would
works.
go well.
Work that way.
would go
but,
well,
yeah.
exactly.
What's your next
Okay.
one?
So again, we also discussed tipping fees, which are currently at about 70%. And so I would like to reduce that number by just $75,000 to go from $1,091,000 down to $1,016,000.
Well,
I mean, Mike is the best person to ask about this,
Yeah.
and all the conversations we've had, despite the fact that we're doing better this year, have been that this is gonna be going in the other direction.
But he just said it came down.
Because we're working on the spot rates. We had a contract before, correct?
yeah, so,
Right.
so look,
So wouldn't we continue doing that?
I wouldn't wanna do that, I don't wanna.
And
go
that was
spot rate.
already reduced the first time as well. We reduced it by 80,000 last time.
so, this is something, again, I'm actively involved with this. I sit on a state commission, a municipal state review board for municipal waste. And what we don't know is what fuel costs are gonna be that are gonna affect these tipping fees. So and because we're on the spot market like we're doing now, I don't know when that's gonna end. So we could reduce it somewhat, but we run the risk if the market goes to 125, we're at 110 right, or 103 now, I'm sorry, then that blows that line out of the water.
All right, Nancy, keep going, please.
So it was originally budgeted, I believe, at $1,136,000,
Yes.
and we reduced it down to $191,000. So I think I had originally proposed an $80,000 reduction.
And what's your proposal again on that line?
75.
75?
Let's see, I think it was...
75.
75, down to $1,016,000.
All right, you know what, I'll go along with that.
Okay. Let's see, so we've done this, we've done this. Again, in terms of the insurance and general fire and liability, in 2022, we spent $358,000. We're currently running at about 60%, which is $337,000. And for whatever reason, we have a budgeted amount that's like $200,000 more, of $597,000. So,
I'd be cautious on underestimating insurance premiums. Homeowner insurance premiums, for example, are going up 20 to 30%. Auto insurance. So I think what's proposed, in the budget is reasonable.
Well, wait a minute, let me just make sure I got the right item, because I actually talked to Rich about this, because originally, on one of the earlier budgets, of course, it's an estimate, it's early in the year, right? But the item we're talking now is a quoted number.
Yeah, it is a quote.
So, I mean, there's no logic to drop in a number, we've already got the quote, right?
right, but then how did, in 2022, did we only pay $357,000? Was that
You
the
mean-
quoted amount?
You mean 23 or 22?
Well, we have the actual line item in our budget book of 2022-23. Yeah, sorry. So
This
the
was-
actual number is not the quoted number?
The quoted.
Are you looking at the, I'm sorry, you looking at the budget or the year-to-date numbers?
So in our budget book, on page 23,
Yes.
you can see the amount that is quoted for this year is 569.6, for next year is 597, but if you look at actuals back in 22-23, it was just 357. So how do you go from a quoted insurance amount to something that is so much less?
Wait a minute.
357 is the actual, not the
Yes,
Yeah,
I understand it's the actual amount, but was that the budgeted amount?
I don't know. Well, I'm struggling with the applicability to next year's budget with what we paid 3 years ago.
Well, currently, we're only at 60% with 2 months left in the year. Are
But we
we,
just asked that question.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, there's another
Right.
payment.
are we expecting another bill?
Yes. There's another payment due. So that's, the quote is 569.
But is it gonna be
Right.
40% of the year?
Could be, so.
It seems,
So what we do, folks, is we have an agent
Right.
who goes out to bid for us. We go out to bid every couple of years. And depending on, to use a health insurance analogy, there's a claims history regarding this also. So the quotes and the renewal rates come in that we budget for. So here we are now in May, the end of May, and we've spent 369 out of the 500 plus thousand. There's another payment there. So we budget the quote because that's what's going to be the expense.
Right.
So that one, I think we're playing with fire a little bit. Yeah, to bring it down, I don't see it.
I can't support that.
Yeah, I'm good with the tipping fees. I'm fine with the fund balance. I talked to you about that. I know I can sell that to the rating agencies, but these are areas that are very risky for us to make these commitments.
Nancy, you got one more?
yeah, I just have one more, and again, this is just a small amount, but I just happened to notice in the finance department that we had budgeted for office supplies of $25,000. And maybe everything's gone digital now, but we really have spent very little of that. So I'd like to be able to reduce that amount by about $15,000 if we could.
That is due to, we budget that because it's going, we're gonna need furniture if downstairs is, the conditions are not very well, and we're going to be updating with the bonding package. That's why this year, and it hasn't happened yet, so that's why we haven't expended.
I see. So office supplies also includes furniture.
Right.
I got it. Okay.
And Nancy, if you look at everybody's budget, everybody was up on office supplies.
Yeah, I did
Talked
notice
about
that, which is
that
why
at
I was a little
those
surprised by
meetings already.
finance of all departments that you would be so low. So, and then I just had one more question regarding, again, because this impacts what I suggest. The list of declinations you have for, under Recreation, Division of Community Services, a reduction in recreation part-time of $24,000. So I just want to make sure that that is not a reduction that just simply reflects the closing of the pool, such that we wouldn't need lifeguards for some period of, perhaps July and August. Because if that is the case, then fine, we can make that cut and it doesn't negatively impact anyone. If we're making that cut and it actually eliminates people who actually rely on that summer income, then I'd like to just recommend that we reduce our expenditures in the recreation department for pool utility expenses and other pool chemicals by $25,000 in order to offset that.
I actually don't know the exact answer to that question.
Okay, so under recreation, in your list of declinations, you have a reduction of
No, I
$24,000.
understand what's there. I'm
So-
saying I don't know the answer to your question.
Okay, so you understand the question, just that you don't have the answer. Okay. So that would be my recommendation. If this does in fact just reflect having the pool closed and that cut, really wouldn't impact anyone, then I would say, let's leave it alone. But if it does, I certainly don't want to be eliminating part-time employees that really provide a very valuable service to this town, not just in the pool, but other aspects of our recreation center. And I think that we could actually cover that by reducing the expenditure side of the recreation budget, both pool expenses, utilities, and pool chemicals by $25,000.
So just to be clear,
Yes.
you're not recommending any change in the department. You're recommending a change in the particular lines.
Yes. But again,
Well, the
it's,
current number in the pool, we discussed that it's because it's going to be under construction. That's why we haven't actually ordered the supplies. So next year, we will need those supplies for the pool. It's gonna be up and running.
Yeah, you're right, you just said that. Okay, any other comments from the members before we take another short break?
I would like to make a plea to my fellow Board of Finance members
yes.
that the cut to education be reduced from $1,200,000 to $1 million. They do have unfunded mandates that they have to comply with, and the out-of-district tuition, the number of people enrolled in that, is very volatile, and I think we need to show support for education to the extent that we can, and therefore I do ask for that reduction there from 1.2 to 1.
And I would also support that particular change, particularly if we could use any of the recommendations that I've provided to you. However, I would also just like to comment that the reduction in the original reduction in $1.2 million to the Board of Ed budget, which was really a revision, more than half of that was really just the acknowledging at least a portion of the expected revenue from excess cost grants. So I think that that revision is something that certainly represented several different corrections, and I think we received an email back in February that listed a lot of those corrections, but I think that this additional $1.2 million true cut seems excessive as far as making reductions to the Board of Ed budget. So I would also recommend.
So what do you want to take the 1.2 down
To $1 million.
to
To
$1
$1
million?
million, right?
And again, it's the medical reserves. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking because people that just came in or people that just turned it on are thinking, oh, we're cutting 1.2 million. It's the medical reserves. We've said it many times here. If there's critical illnesses on the Board of Ed and that reserve is gone, the town has to pick it up. It's not cutting positions. I want to reiterate that because people came in late and people might have come in on the
But we
watching.
can't dictate that, right?
What?
All we can say is, this is the Board of Ed budget, and then how they ultimately choose
But
to make
that was
those
a
changes is up to the
again,
Board of
I
Ed.
don't want to beat a dead horse. We already talked about it, but it's an agreement. If something happens, the town has to pick that up. They have a big reserve. So what do we think?
Well, look,
We
one
want-
of the things we've talked about is bumping the fund balance up, and when there was a break before, we spoke, and in my mind, if we, and I'm agreeing to this, that we bump the fund balance up and reduce the insurance reserve from the 1.2 million to the, I thought it'd be 950. So in other words, we're not reducing the mill rate with this. We're taking the transfer from the fund balance by adding 250 to that number that's already in there. We would use the 250 and reduce the insurance reserves by 250. You know, we're not cutting anything, folks. I mean, I've said it 3 times. Diane said it at least twice. We're not recommending cuts to the operational side of the Board of Ed. We wouldn't do that. So it's a medical reserve that has no influence on the operations. And a medical reserve, for the 4th time, I'll say it, that we're going to backstop the Board of Ed if, as Diane just said, there's, these catastrophes. So
But as Mr. Hallahan did mention earlier, we would like to be able to also apply some of these recommended changes to reinstate the library part-time and the recreation part-time, if in fact that is something that would have an impact on those part-time employees. If it's just a reduction in recreation because of the pool closing, that's a different matter. But I certainly would like to reinstate the library part-time, and if there's anything left over, further reduce the mill rate.
All right, I suggest we have another short recess. We'll make this one quick. Be back at 9 o'clock.
I second the motion.
Okay. We are back from our recess. Probably the easiest thing to do is to summarize the sentiments of the caucus. Let's go to the revenue side first.
Yep.
I think there was some uncertainty on some of the suggestions, including the ECS, the tax collector interest and liens, and the building fees. I gave you my comment on the ECS. On the tax collector interest to building and liens, we've had a very strong year because there was such a backlog of cases that from COVID, we were able to settle some this year. So we've had an extraordinarily strong year. But the other thing that's happened is that the time frame to conduct a foreclosure is getting stretched out because there's such a backlog of cases. The building fees, Mike tells me we were having a strong year because we got in an especially large fee of $300,000, and I think he said 2 projects. Now, on some of the other items, I think we're in agreement that we can move the fund balance up $250. And we had a little bit of a brief discussion on the interest rates. I know the suggestion was $200. I think the 5 people to the left here believe a $100,000 increase is appropriate.
Okay, so that's a total of $350 then?
Sure is, yep. Now, on the expense side, we would reduce the cut to the Board of Ed from $1.2 million down to $950,000. We would restore the cut to the recreation, so no cut to the recreation department. We had proposed 24. No cut to the library. We would propose 15, or propose 0. By the way, that appears to be a combination of some actual, it was a little bit the roof and a little bit actual service reductions. And then the tipping fees, which I think you heard Mike said he would support a $75,000 reduction to tipping fees, so we would add that to our our declinations here. So,
But I think there were 2 other reductions in expenses, the recreation expense of 25 and the insurance general of 100.
well, you did. I don't
Yep.
think there's support for that, those 2 cuts.
So recreation expense, among the 4 line items for the recreation department, even though there is there's also a capital line item for pool chemicals and.
Well, Ingrid mentioned the chemicals just a moment ago, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not being used this year, right? So we have that as unused expenses. But for the next year, in addition to the line items, which should by definition be lower because the pool will be closed for 2 months, we also have a capital line item.
The capital line item is, that one is used for the yearly maintenance.
So that's not,
That's separate, yes.
that's separate from this chemical maintenance.
Yes.
So you don't think that 2 months of the pool being closed would warrant any reduction in the expenditures for recreation?
Well, I think it would be tracking on time, right on target this year if we're just holding and ordering until we know when we're going to close the pool. If anything, chemicals and everything, their prices are going to be increasing.
So I'll summarize, if you don't mind. So that'll be an increase on the revenue side of $350,000. That is a well, I want to make sure I say this correctly out to people in the audience. It's a reduction of the expenses of $286,000. So it's about a $66,000 change in the budget to the positive, right? More revenues than expenses. So the mill rate will go down incrementally. My quick math said from the change wouldn't be 2.03, it would be 2.01, but the Board of Ed would have their dollars restored. We talked about the other cuts, and then we talked about the revenue.
Okay.
All right, before we do some math with Ingrid, I just want to let the board members have a chance to comment if they'd like. All right, give Ingrid a minute, and I'll run my own numbers, and we'll cross-check them. I mentioned it.
Okay. Thanks.
I did some quick math. I mean, I could be off, but
Well, not that far.
Total change of 425. 350 increase in revenue, and 75 increase in expense. This is 39.
Oh, okay. Oh, it might be under, it might be under.
So 239 is 425. This is 239.
No, sorry, no, you have 350.
Right. So 350 and 75.
No.
425. So it's increasing revenue by 350.
Yeah.
And decreasing expenses by 75. The net effect is combined, right? Changing the budget by 425.
That's,
It's a reduced expense. Right? Increasing revenue, reducing expenses.
increasing revenue.
Yeah. And the tipping fee expense is going down by 75. So we're having an overall
No, there's
beneficial.
more than that.
75K.
We're restoring cuts to the recreation and library.
Well,
Takes me a
this is
little
how we're
while.
using them. This is ultimately the effect. And then from that, we're going to use that to reduce this by 39, right? And this by 1.2 to 950. So that's what, 250. So that's 89.
16,000,
Oh, I think that gets us under 2.3. I guess it's under 2. No, 136.
Yeah, 136. Which is added to all this. So rather than a 2.03, it's probably a 2.3.
what is the current?
Might be a little under.
Might be a little under.
Might be a little under.
Could be on the other side.
We're looking for-
John, you weren't going to do anything tonight anyway.
This didn't.
What, laundry?
I added revenue. The unappropriated is gonna go from 250 to 500, and the short term,
Short-term at 100.
yep. So it went from 750 to 850. So that's good. Why is it not pulling the numbers here? Because my budget actually increased instead of decreasing,
What?
my already increased.
What's that?
Why did it do that?
Did you take the board down to 950?
What did you get for town?
64,557,603.
That's what I got.
The Board of Ed should be 64,022,728, right?
That's what I got. But instead of decreasing, the mill rate increases.
Not yet. Okay, so, but now we have additional revenue of 400,000, sorry, 350, right?
I already put that into consideration.
You have the general fund is now 500, right?
Yeah.
You got the interest, should have gone up 100, whatever it was, it should have gone up 100, right?
Yeah?
So what do you have for mill rate? Should be around 3466, 65.
64.
3464.
Yeah.
So that's right. Why do
What was it before? It's just I have like a million budgets here. 3468. Okay.
No, that's with the cuts that Richie gave us today.
Okay, this is the original.
It was originally,
I got it here. This is the original. Oh my God. It's been a day.
that's right. It was a 265 increase.
It was a 3530.
Right, it was 3530. That's right.
So then, hold on. Your three numbers. I got your three numbers here. Town, for your resolution.
Yeah. So town,
64,557,603.
yep. Board of
And then
Ed,
Board of Ed, 64,022,728.
yep.
For a total budget of $128,580,331.
Yeah, my scribbles are right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. If I say it wrong, correct me. Okay, thank you for everyone. I know it's been a long night for all of us. I'll sum up in 1 second, and then I'm going to read some resolutions. So, for those of you who are taking notes, and just a reminder, by the way, I said it before, but we're going to vote on the expense side, but we, of course, talked about revenues a lot, and eventually, people, including myself, want to know what's my actual bill going to be in terms of my mill rate, right? So, the town government side is going to end up being $64,557,603. The Board of Ed side will be $64,022,728. And the town side will be $128,580,331. I'm sorry, I said town. I put T, I meant total. Yes, that's the total.
What was that last number again? 128?
$128,580,331.
Got it.
And don't forget, we had some revenue suggestions that we're going to incorporate into the budget. If you do that, we will have a new mill rate, Sally, you're correct, of a 1.99 increase, so we'll go from 32.65 to 34.64. So, I will find my resolutions and actually read that in a more formal way, but those are the numbers. Anybody got the resolution handy?
Here, Tim.
Thank you. Okay. All right, got it. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Ingrid. Okay. I'd like to make a motion. Resolve that the Board of Finance recommends a town government budget for fiscal '24-25 in the amount of $64,557,000 $557,603. I'd like a second, please.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. I'd like to make a motion, resolved, that the Board of Finance recommends a Board of Education budget for fiscal year 24-25 in the amount of $64,022,728. I'll take a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Final motion I'll make is resolved that a total budget for fiscal year 24-25 in the amount of $128,580,331 made up of the town government of $64,557,603 and the Board of Ed of $64,022,728 be presented to the special budget town meeting to be held on Monday, June 3rd, 2024. I'd like a second, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. Thank you all very much. One second. Okay, sorry you've been waiting a long time. If anyone would like to speak, please make themselves known and come to the podium. Please come up, sir.
Hello, Scott Friedman, 17 Cooper Road. I just want to start off by thanking all of you for an incredible amount of work, dedication to the town, and really just a substantive amount of deliberation. The dedication both of you all on stage and all the department heads who spent all their time crafting and then modifying their budgets is commendable. Yesterday's results were a disappointment. At the same time, I think they were somewhat of a foregone conclusion. I've said this before, I said it at the budget public hearing, and I'm going to say it again. I have been through multiple budget cycles now. I've been speaking at the public hearings. There has not been a single substantive change driven by the comments that happened after your proposed budgets. Comments at the public hearings are not reflected in the discussions and the changes that are made. And I need to reflect on that because it also comes up in the fact that the budget was voted down last night to Board of Finance member Barrett's, I'd say, very apt comments. You don't really know why. I think the reasons that were given were actually pretty spot on. I think the yes votes were a combination of loyalty to you all, to the process, to Mr. Frieda, and funding for education, which has obviously been the subject of the notes that Mr. Hallahan read out. And I'm right there with those people, which is to say, I think that you all do a very good job of trying to steward our town's finances, and I think that our Board of Education, the Medical Reserve Fund specifically, which is obviously the subject of a lot of discussion tonight, is actually good financial management. Which does bring me to a point that I have come to over and over again, which is that the discussions around our financial management of our Board of Ed have been problematic, to say the least. Now, I also think this is a distraction. I think it's a distraction from the fact that last year, between the Board of Ed budget workshop and the public hearing, there was a $250,000 cut to education that was never communicated to the town. It simply came out in the Board of Finance proposed budget. And then I spoke about it, and I spoke about it again, and the superintendent accepted it, so there was no discussion to really be had last year. I will say this again. We've lost the budget director, the finance director of the Board of Ed, who was here, Howard Wardlow. I really do appreciate Christian Strickland taking immense ownership of this process. But I also feel it needs to be said that we need to treat our elected officials, we need to treat our staff and our administration with respect, and I think we need to stop treating everyone in this process like they're trying to get one over. And frankly, as a member of a town meeting government, I also think you need to treat us with respect. Now, one of the things I'd like to see in next year's budget process is, one, I would certainly like to see more than 24 hours between if the budget does get voted down and when you come back to make changes to expenses. Two, there should absolutely be public comment before, not after you vote. I actually think you did a pretty good job of making, I'll call it reasoned cuts. And at the same time, I don't feel like this process has been inclusive of our town, and we're a town meeting budget, or a town meeting government. And the second thing, and this goes to the process, there are people like me who are willing to dig into the numbers deeply and review the budgets, but I'm really not given the opportunity to do that. So next year, I ask that everything that comes out of the budget workshops be put into spreadsheets, accessible on our town website, not after the proposed budget, not at the budget hearing, but as of the Board of Ed workshop. I want to know what the Board of Ed really wants. Two, I then want to see that updated with changes denoted, which is something you guys need anyway, given to the town in advance of the budget hearing. And then I really do want to hear you engage with the challenges that we have as a town. I personally think, and I know this from statistics, the 100% only thing that you have control over that has a statistically significant impact on property values is education. It's the only thing. Police, fire, parks and rec, there's not a single other thing that significantly impacts, statistically significantly impacts, your property values. And I'm going to challenge this group to think not about how things changed from last year per se, but how we want to be seen in 10 to 25 years. Because I do have some faith and some loyalty in our current executive leadership and our current leadership as a whole. And I also think that we are fundamentally underestimating what North Haven can be. I think from an education perspective, we're at the top of the second tier to the middle of the second tier, but we're not investing like even the schools in our area, in that group. And so, you know, I said this last year, I want my friends who are in Hamden paying 20 mils higher tax rates to want to live in North Haven. Some of them do, but many of them say it's not inclusive enough, it's not diverse enough, it's not a welcoming environment at times.
They're scared.
Well, I mean, all that being what it is, what I'll say is this. We're a great town. We're doing amazing things. We have capable leadership. We do need to treat each other nicer, better, and respect each other's professional capabilities. That goes for the town. But please, if I continue participating, as I have, at all of these Board of Finance meetings and budget hearings, and I don't hear engagement with why we were adding 2 police officers and no fire, which was discussed by Anthony DePasquale at the budget hearing, I want to know why. And to be clear, these are all things that in many ways the things I'm asking for don't really require budget changes. They're really about process, communication. I'm going to shout out Alex Johnson here, who asked for the meeting presentation, the budget presentation, to be shared on social media. I think that was a humongous step for our town. We need to do more of that. We need to share with our town. And you know, I'll end with appreciation again, because this is all very hard. And just say that, you know, I'm hoping that we can continue investing in our town and capably managing it, so that my daughter, who's 6 now in a 75-year-old school, can have a new school at some point in her career, and that we're not going to continue to have half days that are driven by air conditioning, which, you know, is not happening in our elementary schools. So I think that those are things that we need to reckon with. I know we got turned down for the grant that we applied for, the HVAC grant, but I would say this: with good financial management, which we have, we can potentially do that on our own, which maybe New Haven can't. So anyway, with that said, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Yes, Stacy?
It's kind of hard to hear in the back with the fans. Did you set the date for the special budget meeting for the 3rd? Did you say that specifically?
Yeah,
Yes,
it's
he
on
did.
the sheet.
Yes.
Okay, and so have you decided upon the referenda date?
No, Stacy, we talked about it a little bit in the meeting. Mike and the other members of the Board of Selectmen are meeting Friday. So once they meet, they'll put the dates on their agenda.
Okay, well, I have a problem of needing to order ballots. So I need to know sooner rather than later, because I was going to submit my order tomorrow with these numbers, and if it's not clear what date you're going to have, I can't do that. And that
Well,
means,
Mike,
I'm
you
just-
and Mike can work that out tomorrow, King?
I'm just throwing that out
Yeah.
there because of timeline issues.
Yeah.
I think, Stacy, why don't you come up to see me tomorrow at about 10 o'clock, and we'll have it mapped out.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
Okay, thanks, Stacy.
Amazon delivers overnight.
Hi, Jenny Caldwell, 69 Kimberly Circle. I just have a couple of quick questions because I wasn't clear on this. The recreation part-time positions, are they remaining in the budget or were they eliminated? Those are remaining. What about the library?
Yes.
So both library and rec will remain as they are?
The cuts that we proposed at the end of the meeting were restored.
They were restored. Okay, I just wasn't 100% sure of that. And then just one comment or, possibility of, I think there a lot have been said about why the budget got turned down yesterday. Is there any way to do some kind of survey or feedback thing on the website so that you can get input from residents who, I know people can write to the Board of Finance, but that might be a way to elicit what are some of the reasons why people voted no. So it's just a suggestion, just to get more feedback.
All right, I know it's late. Anyone else like to? Yes, Mary, please.
Sorry, hot. Mary White, Summer Lane. So the original declinations that were proposed about 3 hours ago, you mentioned CBR tax increment financing, taking it out. I didn't catch the number.
118?
I think it was 118. I think Mike's right.
118,000.
118,000, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so we have heard again that the Board of Education is going to have an over $3 million estimated surplus. Could be as high as $3.9 million.
Well, wait a minute.
Wait, that's just a very
Estimate,
rough estimate. It is by
okay.
no
'Cause
means
Yeah.
etched in stone.
Right,
No.
prior meetings, there was an estimate of 3.6 million, so, but there's an estimate. I mean, there's going to be a surplus. And what I think is a large one, maybe other people disagree, but I think it's a large one. So on that topic, I believe that, my understanding is that there was a collaboration that took place regarding the proposed reduction in, for the Board of Education side, and I understand they can use it as they implement it as they wish. But it was, implied or agreed during this collaboration that it would be reducing the medical reserves, which they have 3.2 million, down to 2 million, with a reduction of 1.2 million. So, and then, of course, we heard over and over that there would be no changes in operations of the Board of Education. So my question is, did I understand it that the $250,000 from the fund balance, that's going to offset that $1.2 million decrease, and making that, what was it, 950,000. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, so I did get that right. Okay. I personally do not like using the fund balance money when, as Mike explained, we currently score low now. I also don't like, relative to the interest on short-term investments, there was a proposed of 200,000, so an increase, and then I understand it was agreed on the proposed 100,000. I think we all are agreeing that the rates are going to go down. What goes up must come down. And then lastly, yes, so this, just correct me if I'm wrong, because I could be wrong here. So is this the third budget that 2 firefighters have not been added to the budget?
I have to look back.
Yeah, I mean,
This, third.
so he asked last year, I know that, Mary.
Okay, so that's true? We think that's a true statement?
It's true for
It
2
might have
years.
went from half year to full year,
Right.
3 budgets ago.
You think so?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in other words, Mary, there were two firefighters that were a half year that then evolved to a full year. So
So are we saying 2 budget cycles for sure? That there's no 2 firefighters have been added? 2 budget cycles, 2 years?
2 years.
Okay. So as a reminder, currently there are 4 shifts. 1 shift has 11 firefighters. 3 shifts have 10 firefighters. And these staffing numbers are not in compliance with the National Fire Safety Standards. And earlier this year, the fire chief provided the Board of Finance with a report illustrating the overtime savings with the 11-man shift. So from what I understand, again, please correct me if I'm wrong, if we had added the 2 firefighters to the budget, if we had included them, say for January 2025, that would make 2 more shifts, 11-man shifts, and thus saving, I believe it's $90,000 in overtime per firefighter. So resulting in my understanding, again, correct me if I'm wrong, a net 0 impact to the budget. So I was wondering if those statements are true.
you'd have to double check, Mary.
You have to double check, okay. Again, so I'd like to close with saying that the Board of Education could certainly have handled reducing their medical reserves by the agreed upon in the collaboration meeting of 1.2 million. And I'd like to again emphasize that we need to, every year, we have to staff the fire personnel, and we're not doing it, and it's public health and safety is at risk. So, okay then.
You're the chairman.
Yeah, I guess.
My name is Ron Patrick. I live at 37 Susan Lane. I'm also the chair of the Board of Education. Just a couple of things I'd like to clear up. The reserve that we have for insurance is 3.2 million. It's not 3.9, it's not 3.6 or any other number. It's very close to 3.2. The reason it's at 3.2 because that was what is suggested that we keep as a reserve by our insurance company. So it is not a place where we just store money. It's a place where we try to make sure that in case of worst case circumstance, we are covered and we don't have to come to the town for money. I appreciate Mike, Tim, and the rest of the board for working feverishly to try to get this resolved. I know it's a very difficult situation. I had a conversation with Tim today that was wasn't brief, but it was direct, and I appreciate that, Tim, like I mentioned on the phone before. So just to clarify those two things, it's 3.2, not anything other than that. There was no collaboration meeting. I don't know where that came from either. We have never met to say, hey, listen, the budget's going to be over. Why don't you guys take 1-2 out of your reserve and we'll all be good. That conversation never happened.
I don't want to interrupt you because I had to step out. I was actually going to make that correction. It wasn't necessarily a collaboration. He's not wrong. It was a conversation.
Right, and
Right.
it was a conversation
Yes.
of many conversations
Yes.
that we had.
Right.
So there was never an agreement to say, this is what's gonna happen.
Right.
If, if this happens, that will happen. That never was said. I just wanted to make sure that was very clear.
So,
Thank you,
Mr.
Ron.
Bathrick, you were not aware prior to this meeting?
No, he was aware. What he's saying is he didn't necessarily agree with the $1.2 million.
Right.
You did not
Correct.
agree with it?
Correct,
I see.
correct.
Okay.
I'm not saying many conversations were had.
Right.
Many. I'm always going to fight for the Board of Ed, try to do what's right. When you're tossing around numbers of $1.2 million, you're always going to try to get less. It's like anything else. If it was 500,000, we would try to get less. You always try to negotiate down, much as your board does, right? You always try to negotiate down. So, that's where we're at, and I just want to make sure that those couple of things were clear.
Right, and just one other
Sure.
thing regarding the medical reserve fund. We didn't actually receive any of the special reserve fund reports this month, including the medical reserve. So, we really don't have the data to be able to evaluate, where is the Board of Ed reserve fund at this particular time.
Well,
So-
it's in his report. It was $3.2 million.
The sum was listed.
Yeah, it was there.
The sum was listed. but
Right.
you're
Right. The
individual report.
actual reports.
Yeah.
I think it's very important for us to be able to see the reports because they also provide, the 3 different tiers of what the fund balance, what the reserve balance could be and how that, the various,
I looked at the report before the meeting. They're $1.2 million over the reserve level. There's 3 different reserve levels, as you mentioned,
Yes.
Nancy. There's a high, a low, medium, and a high.
Exactly.
They're $1.2 million over the low. That's where they are.
Right. We tried to maintain the high.
Right, exactly.
So why didn't we get the report if you were able to see it?
You got it. I got it from our package last month.
Last month.
Oh, last month.
Yeah.
Last month. Yeah, I'm saying this month. The packet that we received for this meeting, right, we didn't get.
No, it was not in tonight's package.
Right.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron.
Thanks, Ron.
Before we take any more public, and we will come back, the meeting is still open. It's come to my attention that we incorrectly, I should say, stated the wrong date for the special budget town meeting. So with your forgiveness, I'm going to reread the final resolution, which is the only one that had the date. The correct date should have been June 10th. Stacy? June 10th? So I'm going to reread the resolution and ask the members if they wouldn't mind reapproving that. So I'd like to make a motion that resolved that a total budget for fiscal year 24-25 in the amount of $128,580,331 with a town government side of $64,557,603 and a Board of Education budget of $64,022,728 be presented to the special budget town meeting to be held on Monday, June 10th, 2024. I'd ask for a second, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, thank you. I appreciate your indulgence. Back to public comments, if any. If you wouldn't mind, ma'am, I'll have you come up next, if you don't mind.
No, you go ahead. You're already up.
Yeah, I'll have you come up next, all right?
Sherman Katz, 44 Sherwood Drive. Been a resident here now for nearly 60 years. Been to a lot of meetings, a lot of referendums. And I want to say that I hear this thing about parity. The police get it, the fire have to get it. The fire get it, the police have to get it. I don't understand why you have to have a parity with the two. If you're running a company, a business, just because this one wants your next, well, it's your home. Just because your neighbor wants a Cadillac doesn't mean you need to have a Cadillac. So I think that we should sort of get that out of our heads. The other thing is, I keep hearing if we hire 2 firemen, we're going to save $90,000 a year. Well, we've been doing that now for how many years, and we haven't saved the $90,000 that I know of. One of the problems this makes your job tougher, when your department heads come in and ask for funds that are far in excess of what they really need to operate. So you're on the defensive and they're on the offensive, and until you come to a meeting of the minds, you spend 2 or 3 months. It's unfortunate. I don't know what you could do about it. When I dealt with the unions, we had built up a trust so that we were a little closer. And I hate to bring this up, but the Board of Education, we spend quite a few dollars on Board of Education. In 1996, North Haven was 45, their standing was 45th in the state of Connecticut. Right now, we would drop down to 96th in the state of Connecticut. I brought this up several times in past years. I've never seen a superintendent, explain why our ranking has dropped so significantly. I'm not going to go into a lot of details. The thing about why do people vote? I didn't talk to everybody in town. I talked to some people, or they talked to me. The 3.65 mils scared them. They were looking at a tax bill of $500, $600, $700. I had friends that they talked about their taxes were going to go like $1,200. I think that was the first thing that brought to the attention that, hey, I can't afford that. And secondly was when, sorry, Mike, when you said we may have to cut services, that created a lot of conflict with the people that, well, geez, they're not going to pick up my trash. They're not going to take, they're not going to have the library. You said you may have to have layoffs. Well, if you have to have layoffs, you lay off, unless you can find other jobs for those people. And we always did that, Mike. You've been in business. You don't like to lay off, but you do what you have to do. That's all I'm saying. I know you guys worked hard, stayed up late nights, and I won't bother you anymore. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Katz.
Thank you, Sean.
Why don't we come to the front row here?
Alex Johnson, 50 Fallon Drive. I just wanted to thank the board for restoring the library. The library is incredible. I graduated 2012. I'm not going to do the math. It's too late for that. But none of my friends voluntarily wanted to go to the library. It was stuffy, it was boring, there wasn't anything for like teenagers. And now I see like the kids here that were waiting were like, can I go to the library? Can I go to the library? They have a teen zone. Like, I would love to see even more improvements. Having a place for the kids to go is amazing. The number one thing I hear from people is there's nothing for kids to do in town except the movies, the library, maybe 1 or 2 things, but a lot of the businesses aren't like for the kids to go bowling, they have to leave North Haven. If they want to go to a trampoline park or something, they got to leave North Haven. And I'd actually encourage the board in adding revenue to the few places that we can encourage businesses to come to try to get things that are meant for kids. It encourages people to come move here. It encourages people to buy homes here. And also, we keep talking about crime, then give the kids a place to go. Like, not everyone likes books. That's okay. The pool, we already know the issue with the pool. But just, even, I know it sounds silly, but a boba shop, a cafe, like someplace safe where kids can go, parents can drop them off, and they can have a good time and not just be like hanging out in the park like my friends doing things that this is recorded and I'm not going to say, like when I was back at that age. Like, we need to have stuff that's not just for the older generation, but for the younger as well. I also wanted to thank for restoring the funding to the rec center and especially the Board of Education. I am the daughter of a professor and a teacher, and I will never stop saying it. Don't touch the Board of Ed budget. Leave it alone. My mom worked 12 hours. She would wake up 5 a.m., get to school by 6:30. She would stay all the way till 4:30 p.m., even sometimes 5 for her students. go home, cook dinner, and then stay up till 10 p.m. grading. They don't get paid enough. All the work that the Board of Ed does, they don't get they don't get their just desserts. And we should be, it is pathetic that we are, in our DRGD, the second lowest for percentage of what we put towards our Board of Ed budget. That just sends another signal to everyone around us that they shouldn't move here. There's not stuff for the kids. We're not investing in education. And then I apologize for interrupting Scott, but I'm also an Uber driver. And the first question when they get in my car is they're like, oh, where are you from? And I always say, oh, North Haven. Most people of color that are in my car instantly get nervous. They get like this. And they're like, some of them don't say anything. Some of them are literally like, well, isn't North Haven a little racist? And they're like, isn't North Haven like really white? Like, for a town that's trying to diversify, it's slightly problematic that the Board of Finance is all white. Like, it's all white. And our town is not that as much anymore. And I do think that needs to be taken into consideration, along with transparency, which encourages people to participate in government, to want to take positions on boards, and to show what our town really looks like. Like, I do agree that the mill rate probably scared more people to come out, but what I did in social media within a weekend, we went from having 500 people come vote last year to triple that amount by using the algorithm and not just posting once, but actually using social media properly, which again, the kids are geniuses at this. Give them some school credit, give them some college credit, let them help you. And let's modernize this town to a place where people feel safe and feel comfortable and want to live. And also that the boards reflect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the audience wish to speak? Sally?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Sally Buemi, 5 Blossom Drive. Ever since about 8:30 last night when I found out the results of the referendum, I've been trying to decide what mill rate I would find acceptable to support this budget. And I concluded late this afternoon that it had to be under 2. So you're at 1.99. So you did that. I knew that getting down to that level would require an almost $2 million either reduction or also work on the revenue. So I'm very glad that you incorporated some revenue changes as well. Everybody thinks, oh, the budget's got to be reduced. Most people do not understand that increasing non-tax revenue sources also helps with the mill rate. So I do support this budget. I wish it was a little bit less, but it is under 2. So I support this budget. I'm also glad that most of the revisions of your declinations improved the Board of Ed reduction from the 1.2 to down to 950,000. It almost equates the deductions on the town side and the Board of Ed side. The Board of Ed still has a slightly larger reduction, but I'm pleased with the 250,000. I wish there was a way to get it down a bit more, but I'm not going to press it because you're under 2. But one thing I did notice is that when there was the discussion of the fund balance, Mr. Frieda did say, I heard him, that he could sell half of the fund balance as we wean off, and that 500,000 isn't quite half. 700,000 would have been half, because the current fund balance budget is 1.4, 1,425,000. So I was...
Mr. Frieda's opinion's very important to this board, but he's one of 7 members.
Right.
And I, for one, wouldn't have agreed to 750.
I know. Well, I've said I'm not pushing it, but that was what I had in my head, was going to 7 because it was half. And I thought, that half was a significant weaning. But I'm not pushing for that. I'm telling you that I'm glad that you did agree to increase the fund balance revenue line from 250 to 500,000. And that it was put toward helping the Board of Ed. So I appreciate all the hard work that every member put in, and all the comments, and so I support this budget, and thank you very much
Thank
for
you,
your
Sally.
time and attention. Bye.
Thank you. Okay. Any final comments from anyone? Yes, ma'am.
I'm tired. Good evening. Thais Moore, 550 Clintonville Road, North Haven, clearly North Haven. I want to first say thank you for a lot of work and a very long night. You know, trying to balance out town and board, I know is not easy. I think in my emails in the email that I sent earlier, I talked about attending the school concert for the twins over at Clintonville, and one of the things, and I said to Superintendent Stirk, I'm like, you know, walked into the gym and we were sweating bullets. The moms, the grandparents, the fans weren't on. We were trying to open doors. The kids were sweating. They're singing and they're fanning themselves. And then I walk in here and it's like a breath of fresh air. I was like, whew. As a woman of a certain age, it felt really good to be in this building and in this space. But it made me think about equity, right? So when we're talking about equity between the town and board and what like our educators and students are experiencing versus what, you know, what's being experienced in the town. I just want to be mindful of that. I want to be mindful of the fact that the Board of Ed did ask for a smaller increase over the town. However, we were asked to cut more. I should say I am a member of the Board of Education, but as in addition to being a resident and a mom in town. The one thing I would ask for is just continuing to think about respectful discourse. You know, if any of us that have been in families, I'm an only child, but your mom or your family always told you don't fight amongst each other, right? You figure out a way to make it work, and what happens in the house, you don't take outside of the house.
Well, you're clearly not Irish, because in Irish families, you fight. Okay? So it's a different point of view.
We'll
but
talk about that later.
That's
We'll
what
talk
happens
about-
in my house. I can say that's what happens, okay?
But when you go outside, you don't let anybody fight your cousins, right?
Correct.
So I just
That's when
want
you defend them, you're right.
That's right. That's right. So I just want to make sure that as a family, as a town and board family, that there is a respectful discourse. We don't have to agree to disagree, but we need to be respectful of each other, especially of our leaders. We are asking them to do so much for our town, for our families, our community. I think that they deserve the respect of being respected. If there is something that you cannot agree on, and I should not have to put on my mom voice right now, but I will. But if there is something that you cannot agree on, there's no reason why we can't have a conversation behind closed doors in front of folks and talk it out. Most things are lost in communication. I've heard a lot of miscommunication leading into these sessions. I've attended more budget sessions than I ever have in my over 20 years of living here. If I were to just listen to the meetings and not understand what was happening, I'd have a lot of misinformation. So I think if we just focus on more communication and how we communicate with each other, we'd be a lot better at being able to resolve some of these things. So I just want to thank you all once again for your time. Thank you all for coming a little bit further, bringing that 1.2 million down to 950,000, and we will be respectful stewards of the town's money. So thank you very
Great.
much.
Thank you for your comments.
Have a good evening.
Thank you. Okay. Any final comments from any members of the audience? If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Make the motion.
Second, please. All in favor? Aye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.